KTN Weekend Prime with Yvonne Okwara.
A very good evening to you this Sunday, the 31st of August, on the brink of a new month. We thank you for joining us in our bulletin tonight. Now, indeed, it's a new month tomorrow and a new dawn for the civil service. We'll be telling you about that restructuring program and that headcount that begins tomorrow. One of the persons who's charged with this process, Kinuthia Wamwangi, who is the chair of the Transition Authority, will be with us here to talk about this headcount and what it heralds for the civil service. Also on Checkpoint today, we're asking you, what has your experience been with the Constitution 4 years on? Senators Bill Okero, Mutula Jr., as well as Bobby Mukangi, who was in the original committee of experts, will be joining us here today. Your views, as always, are important and we appreciate them. Getting a lot of views on social media. Let's start off with Esau Busiega, who says emphasis has been on the letter rather than the spirit. What are your views? Keep them coming into this bulletin. We have all of those interviews, plus the top stories of the day.
Walipata majeraha, waine walikufa hapo hapo.
Nilikuwa ndani ya basi nikaona hiyo gari dogo linakuja kama imeruhusu control.
A grisly road accident leaves 6 lives lost in Bomet.
Hizo ni tamaduni na lazima wakae hapa mpaka hao watu waweze kupatikana.
Search for missing bodies. 8 bodies still underwater in Budalangi.
What you find here before me are the KCPE original certificates.
No schools to go to. Learning in Mandera remains suspended.
Kwa nini saa hii tunafanya kazi sasa ni makosa kuitisha pesa ya kusaidia watu walio machinani?
Kuna watu hawajui kupanga, hawajui kuunganisha, hawajui kujenga.
And the battle of the Rutos as referendum politics gains momentum. Now, it seems lately that our bulletins begin on a tragic note. Today is no different. 5 people died today when a vehicle they were traveling in was involved in an accident on the Bomet-Narok highway. 4 of the victims, a man and 3 boys, died on the spot, while a girl was pronounced dead on arrival at Longisa County Referral Hospital. The 3 p.m. accident, which occurred near Longisa Boys Secondary School, involved the saloon vehicle that was headed to Narok from Bomet and a bus that was headed to Nairobi from Western Kenya. According to Bomet Deputy OCPD Jeff Amwera, the driver of the bus was allegedly overtaking on a hill and collided head-on with a saloon vehicle.
Dogo linakuja kama imeruhusu control. Kucha hivi kama inataka kugonga gari yetu. Driver akajaribu kwenda pande ile nyingine. Akaona inamfuata. Yakarudi pande ile nyingine ya gari. Yakajaribu kuokoa maisha ya watu. Yakapata kama amemgonga. Wamegongana.
Waine walikufa hapo hapo. Mzee na watoto 3. Alafu mama na mtoto mmoja wamekimbizwa Longisa Referral Hospital in critical condition.
An engaging Sunday it was for law enforcers and the public as efforts to retrieve bodies of yesterday's tragedy desperately got underway. 8 bodies are still underwater, with only a few recovered. And as KTN's Francis Ontomo reports, it was a case of bowing to traditions that demand that families in such circumstances camp at the scene until the bodies are recovered.
Dawn to dusk, an operation gets underway. An operation to retrieve the bodies of victims of the tragic boat accident that doused villagers of Siginga. Almost 24 hours later, and the 8 bodies are yet to be recovered from the waters. Families affected deciding to camp along the shores of River Nzoia, waiting upon the moment when finally the bodies will emerge. Contrite faces painting the desperation hanging here.
Paka watu wale wapatikane ambao wako kwa maji, hasa wale waliohusika na wale ambao wamefiwa, lazima wakae hapa. Hizo ni tamaduni na lazima wakae hapa mpaka hao watu waweze kupatikana.
Authorities put the number at 8 for bodies still underwater, and until today, efforts to locate the missing bodies bearing no fruit. Rowing rookies Brian Olibo and Vitalis Okoth, both from the students of John Osogo Secondary School, were at the time of the tragedy the men in control of the boat. The inexperienced duo captained affairs for just about 20 minutes from the shore until things took the saddening twist. Their parents traumatized to a degree from the event.
Amepoteza wajukuu wake wawili. Hao wajukuu wake walikuwa wanamsaidia na kazi ya kuvusha watu hapa, alafu wanapata kidogo anakula.
Niko hapa kwa huzuni, kwa maana sina chochote, jiwezi.
The ill-fated voyage from Siginga to Mau Mau, a distance of about 1 kilometer, hit a snag yesterday. 7 people on board survived the ordeal, and only one body of a 3-year-old has so far been retrieved from the river.
Mimi naona giza mbele huko. Sioni hata mahali ambapo tunaenda. Sasa huyu pilot wa asubuhi anamwambia wewe tuende tu na mkono wa kushoto hii. Tupande tu na hii mkono wa kushoto. Kweli akafuga tukapanda. Sasa tulipofika, tumefika tu kabisa, tumegoa nyuma hiyo mti ambao imeanguka hiyo. Tumegoa hivi, alafu force ya maji ilikuwa hapo nyingi sana.
Safety measures for the water transport sharply coming into spotlight. There are no proper gears in case of calamity, and to make matters worse, there are no reliable response mechanisms here in case of an accident. For now, these families will head back to their homes with heavy hearts. Another dark Sunday that failed to bring out the sight of their loved ones.
Day 2 at Siginga, and an air of anxiety and desperation continues to hang around here. No body has yet been retrieved from the river, and families have decided to camp here, hoping that the bodies will finally be retrieved. Francis Ontomwa, KTN, Siginga, Budalangi.
Francis Ontoma will continue to keep us updated on that rescue operation in Budalangi. Now, court's referendum agenda continued to dominate the political landscape this weekend as politicians traverse the country speaking either for or against it. The domino effect on other centers of power didn't go unnoticed as discussions widened to include the governor's Pesa Mashinani initiative as well as ward representatives' threat to launch a plebiscite push. Fred Omulo gives us the political roundup this Sunday.
How are you good people? Deputy President William Ruto raised his anti-referendum rhetoric a notch higher today as it became clear the opposition CORD coalition won't compromise. Ruto trained his guns on CORD leader Raila Odinga, accusing him of being an agent of disunity in one of the most scathing attacks he has launched in recent times.
Umaarufu wao na ujuzi walio nayo ni ya kutenganisha, ni ya kupangua na ni ya kubomoa. Na kwa sababu hiyo, kwa sababu hawana ujuzi mwingine, ndio mnaona wanasema hii katiba sasa tulio nayo sasa tuanze tena kuibomoa.
His remarks came as Council of Governors Chair Isaac Ruto presided over the launch of the county heads push for more resources, where he asked the government to address their demands.
We are telling them they have got to watch this space. If they don't want to accept that the solution can be found, they watakuta wananchi wote wa Kenya wameungana, hawaelewi Jubilee, hawaelewi CORD, wanataka haki yao tu.
In Garissa, National Assembly Majority Leader Aden Duale sought to defend his government over accusations of tribalism in response to CORD's plan to include ethnic balance as one of the issues in the proposed referendum.
Kama kuna mkabila Kenya ni Raila, na asidanganye wa Somali wa Isili. Sisi wa Somali tumepewa cheo kubwa na Mheshimiwa Uhuru Kenyatta. Dada yetu ndio waziri wa foreign minister. Hakuna Muislamu amepewa hiyo cheo.
If passed, the law will regulate ethnic balance in the public service, preventing dominance or marginalization by any community. In Vihiga County, KOTU Secretary General Francis Atwoli criticized ward representatives for their planned referendum bid.
Sasa kasi ya wale ma-MCAs wote wanataka security. Juzi nilisikia sijua wale wa mama wanaoishi nao wanataka pia sijua wafanywe namna gani. Pesa ni kidogo. Sasa ni juu ya viongozi wetu wale wako kwa opposition na wale wako kwa serikali waitane wakae pamoja with a lot of sobriety.
The ward representatives, like the governors, are pushing for a law that could see counties getting more cash from the central government, with the assemblies granted more financial autonomy. Fred Omulo, KTN Weekend Prime.
Indeed, more of that discussion on Checkpoint a little later on. But first, we want to discuss something else that is more imminent than the referendum, and that is the capacity assessment and restructuring program that begins within the civil service tomorrow. It's all about a head count, but there's more to it than that. And we're joined by one of the persons who's responsible for this, and he is the chair of the Transition Authority, Kinuthia Wamwangi. Thank you for joining us this evening. Let's start by talking about how different this one will be. We have seen several layoffs. About 3 in as many decades. Tens of thousands of workers are laid off, but we still find ourselves with a bloated and inefficient civil service. So tell us how this one will be different.
I think you have started from the wrong end, because this exercise has nothing to do with the retrenchment of people. It has a lot to do and everything to do with the restructuring of the public service, both at the national and the county levels. Because, as you do realize, the government has been reorganized into a devolved system of government. Mm-hmm. We no longer have the public service that was basically based on centralized government. So we have 48 governments, or 48 public services, mm-hmm. and you know, some have been inherited the former local government staff.
That's right.
Some people who used to be the central government have been transferred together with the functions, and now they find themselves in a strange world of county governments where they are the public service there. So we need now to rationalize all these people and make it one seamless public service.
Okay, and I know you mentioned retrenchment is not one of them. It's just every time we have a restructuring exercise, a rationalization exercise, most people become apprehensive about losing their jobs, including the Union of Kenya Civil Servants, that is very apprehensive about this process that starts tomorrow. So what does it involve exactly? Take us through the process.
Yes, as we have said, much of this fear is speculative. And personally, I never engage in speculation. I like to deal with the true and real facts. What is happening is that the summit, and the summit means the presidency, which is the head of the national government, coming together with the 47 county governments, and they agreed that it was important, once we have transferred all the functions, and we have transferred resources, and we have transferred personnel, it was important to come together and also reorganized the national government itself from 42 ministries to 18 ministries.
18, yes.
It was important now to come and pause and say, where are we? Who is where?
So it will involve a head count, and then what?
It will involve a head count so that we know who is in what ministry, agency, government, and we can locate all our public service and say we know so and so is in this place.
It's also about
and that involves everybody, including commissions and independent authorities.
And it also involves ridding the civil service of ghost workers.
That will come naturally.
As part of,
it will come naturally,
right?
Because once you do a biometric capture, obviously a biometric cannot cheat. It will just capture the people who are there.
Okay.
So finally, if there is anybody who was posing as a worker of the
now
the
you have
they will not be captured and they will not be there.
Let's talk very quickly about the skills of those that work in the civil service, and hopefully this exercise will also be able to assess the competencies.
Yes.
Many times the civil service is associated with non-skilled labor or persons who are, you know, the terms that people talk about the people in the civil service. Let's talk about the skills so that the output is also, it's not just about the numbers.
I don't want to be judgmental and speculate people are not competent. But what we are saying, because government has been reorganized, then we must make sure that we match the skills, the jobs, and the people with what they are doing. So the function, the job, the person, the skill. So that you are doing, optimally, you are doing what you are supposed to do.
Okay.
And that's basically what we are trying first to establish.
Right.
And that's why we are calling this a study.
Okay.
And it's not something that's going to recommend about you or me. It's just going to tell us this is the situation on the ground. And we shall make a report to the summit. And then if there are any actions to be taken on the basis of the report and on the, the field report and the ground report, then we shall take decisions then.
Okay.
And I wanted to say that we need not probably speculate too much about the position of the unions, because the unions are part and parcel of us.
Okay.
They are part of the steering committee.
All right.
Yes,
okay.
I sit
so they're
in the steering
included.
committee,
All right.
and they are part of our steering committee.
All right. So no
and
speculation.
we are consulting them at every turn and bend. Yes.
Okay. So no consultation at every level, no fear of retrenchment. It's just a study to begin with.
It's a study.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay. We look forward to seeing that and to seeing how consultative indeed it will be starting tomorrow, and to how the process will begin. So no retrenchment.
What we are saying, this is a study.
Okay.
Probably if you call me after 3 months when the report is out and when it has been discussed and diagnosed and scrutinized, maybe I cannot tell what to come out of that report. This is a study.
Okay.
So we can't begin to speculate on a study.
On what you will find. It'll all depend on what will happen after that.
You can't speculate on a research.
Indeed.
You don't know what will be
you don't know what you will find in the field.
You don't know what will be the research findings.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Kinuthia Wamwangi, who's the chair of the Transitional Authority, talking about that. Welcome back. Checkpoint is coming your way in just a short while. But first, the Bible says that a prophet is never welcome in his hometown. And the latest person to discover this is none other than Professor Anyang' Nyong'o. But for people who think he had a week to forget, he's in the good company of Manchester United. For this and what President Uhuru Kenyatta's retirement job might be, here's Wilson Buru with this week's episode of Mock the Week.
Now, before we even get started tonight, let me say this so that everybody is on the same page. Everybody just leave Manchester United alone. We know what we're doing. Somehow, I think. Look, these jokes are not helping. And what I'm trying to say is, I'm sure we'll not get relegated this season. Hopefully. The 35th week of the year. And it's not just Manchester United who are having a bad week to forget. President Uhuru Kenyatta may be forced to start boarding matatus to work after one of his limousines disappeared. Okay, that's not entirely true, according to the government. State House actually released a statement denying the vanishing of the president's official cars. Yes, all of them are intact. All 20,000 of them. Anyway, the car that apparently grew legs was, according to State House, not part of the president's convoy, which begs the question, if the president's limo under strange circumstances actually disappeared, would State House admit to it? Anyway, here's the good news. The vehicle has been found. It's being sold on OLX. It seems that our dear carjackers are having a field day in this country. Not only are they carjacking the president and the deputy president's men, they're doing it in broad daylight. It's business as usual for these two criminals. Just walk up to the motorist, pull out your guns, and voila. Business transaction done. No big deal. It's probably the fear of being carjacked that led these drivers in Maimahiu and Nakuru to have one too many for the road before they got on the road. I mean, who wants to be carjacked while sober, right?
I'm not sober, oh dear, oh, I'm not sober. I'm not sober because I've taken it. Mama, I've taken it. That has got my God power. I'm not sober.
And speaking of sober or not, these fellows were not happy with the good Professor Peter Anyang' Nyong'o, he who slaved for 9 years for his party ODM. But what exactly was the problem here?
If you are a senator, you have to know your role. To supervise national fund to the county level. To impeach the president. Only those are two roles.
First of all, this fellow is very wrong. Senators do not have 2 roles. They have 3 roles, as stipulated in the Constitution. There is the supervising of the national fund. 2, there is impeaching the president. And 3, and most importantly, there is arguing with the National Assembly over who's got bigger teeth.
You is a young to come and stem the revolution in Kisumu? Who elected you to do that?
The real problem was apparently that the senator had decided to hold a meeting with the governor to consult on development matters, which did not exactly go down well with these fellows here. Poor Peter. He tucked his tail between his legs, hid behind the governor, and got out of there as quickly as he could.
And we shall continue meeting as leaders of the county.
There is too much quarrel between ourselves.
Yes, former President Mwai Kibaki had had it with these two. Granted, he's an old man and all he wants is some peace and quiet to enjoy his retirement, something that these two cannot quite guarantee at the moment. But there's hope.
And I can see my brother Raila here today. I can assure him I have no problem. I look forward to working with him.
I have a question to the president. Mr. President, why do you keep interfering with the microphone stands? Are you saying that maybe you want a change of careers to, I don't know, a sound engineer?
Tuwezi kuendelea namna hii jameni. To extend our leo hii.
But as the president continued doing either what is now his hobby or his future career, the referendum debate continued.
Referendum. The referendum.
And just like the egg and the chicken, the most pertinent question was, what comes first, the signatures or the questions?
You might be signing for homosexuality.
Ati wekeni saini. Ni nini unawekea saini?
Wakati wa kufanya referendum ni sasa. Na kama sio sasa, ni sasa hivi.
There is too much quarrel between ourselves.
I agree with you, Mr. Former President. Everybody just needs to shut up and walk. Wilson Buru for KTN's Mock the Week.
All right, so where are we with our constitution 4 years later? A lot has happened in the last year with the election that operationalized many aspects of the new constitution. Is it still new? Can we call it that? What has your experience been with it? Please send in your comments. 22155 is our SMS number. We'll incorporate as much of your views as we can throughout our discussion. Here are my guests with me tonight to discuss this. On my extreme right, we have Senator Mutula Kilonzo Jr. Thank you for joining us. We also have one of those who was a member of what we now call the original committee of experts, because there's another one that exists now, Bobby Mkangi. And then we have Senator Bill Okero. We thank you all for making the time. Right, let's now begin with you, Bobby Mkangi. When we take a look at, the stories in the news and all of the rhetoric that's going on now, it seems like doomsday. It seems like the country is crumbling. It seems like devolution is not working. Had you envisioned this scenario when you were seeking views from the people and putting together this document? Did you ever see a situation like this?
Well, I think it would have been naive of us as the members of the Committee of Experts, but I would say to broaden it to all of us as Kenyans, to expect that the initial stages of the implementation of the new constitution that it would happen without like what you described, the debates, the arguments, the quarrels that we have right now. I even remember times when you'd go out to speak to a 90 during the run-up to the referendum then, we would, in managing expectations, tell them that even after we pass the new constitution, we should not expect the fruits of that new constitution within a very short period of time. That we should look at it like a plant, that we are going to plant the seed, and then after promulgation, we'll start the work of watering the seed to grow into a seedling, and that would be the process. So as we look at it right now, and especially towards the evening of the first phase of implementation, the first 5 years, when we look at realistically the things that we set out to do, and that is lay the scaffold that would help in the facilitation of the constitution, come up with the legislation as envisaged in the 5th schedule of the constitution, set up institutions like commissions, you've just mentioned, went through an election. Those things we've done perfectly well. But I have to mention also devolution. which was a big game changer
Right.
with this new constitution, in terms of the fact that we've been able to transit without coming to a complete halt, as at some point we feared it would happen.
Even though there were times, Bobby, when it did look like there was going to be a halt and, MCAs were on a go-slow asking for more money.
Exactly.
You still see, the glass being half full rather than half empty.
Exactly. And I think that's why I'm saying we must look at it realistically from those two prisms, that there are new things that were going to come into being. We are transiting within a currency. We are still the same people. The constitution is not a magic wand that was going to turn us,
And it is on that note that I want to move the discussion forward a little bit. Magic wand, you mentioned. Senator Kero, did we have such great expectations of the Constitution? Was it supposed to solve all problems? Was that a notion, do you think, that was sold to us by politicians? Now it's supposed to be able to bring down the cost of living, solve the problem of insecurity, change our mindsets. Did we have too far great expectations of this document?
I think to some extent, yes. There was a pretty good expectation that with the promulgation of the new Constitution, Kenyans would change the way we do things. And one of the things that I know Kenyans agreed, and which I remember the COE, the Committee of Experts, actually mentioned in their first report in Naivasha, was that the Constitution will give Kenya a fresh start, but specifically with regard to certain issues, like, for example, the rule of law, protection of human rights, and respect for everyone, regardless of his faith or his whatever. There's some fundamental issues that we expected, and I think that has happened to a large extent in the way we do things, the system of government, and so forth. But I think I would say it's not really the expectation that is the problem. But from my perspective, it's that we are yet to internalize constitutionalism really as a country. We still grapple with what we've had in the past, where constitutionalism is not really entrenched properly. And so to me that seems to be the challenge.
You mentioned something interesting about the rule of law and respecting that. However, we have seen certain instances where the judiciary and the legislature are at loggerheads over who obeys what court orders. But Senator Kilonzo, we're at the point now where we're saying, okay, we've experienced it for the last 4 years and we want to change that.
Yes.
Referendum. Why now?
Why not now should be the question. It's fair that you look at it from the period where we came from and where we are going. Unknown to many people, we are actually 36 months to the next election. We are 48 months after promulgation. So if you were to do your mathematics and logic, you are actually at halfway time, constitutional time.
Okay.
So this is actually the right time to sit and wonder, to think whether or not we need to assess whether this constitution has worked as envisioned. Because to imagine that their work would begin by the time the election was done in 2013 is wrong, because the work of the constitution began immediately in 2010. So 36 to the next election is a good time for us to be able to determine whether there are certain things we need to review. The other thing that is important is, if you look at the mechanism of the referendum, there's a whole period of 6 months or even more for processes, just between county assemblies, independent electoral commission. So you are actually down to 20 or 25 months to the next election if you're going to have a referendum. So strictly speaking, we are late in terms of making sure or checking, doing a checklist and saying we have done 1 to 10 in terms of the constitution and the next election.
Jubilee has been saying this is not the right time. Senator, what are your thoughts? He says we're with the halfway mark. Do you agree?
I think the issue is not whether the time it's ripe for amendment or not. I think the issue is what are the issues that necessitate the demand for the referendum. And if you remember, when the constitution, when we had a referendum, the last referendum for the constitution, there were issues that have been raised, that are fundamental issues regarding the constitution, really, that people wanted amended. Today, the issues that are being raised are none of those issues. What we call the contentious issues which were identified, really, are not the issues that today
but perhaps,
people are being
Senator,
pushing.
they are not contentious anymore.
Well,
now that it's been implemented.
not really. I think the issues that are coming up today are issues about what individuals really think should be done or should not be done, and from their point of view, really, as opposed to whether the constitution is really serving the interests of the country as well. I think that's where we're saying that it's really, in my view, not the time, because we are not looking at the issues, but we're rather looking at the opportunities really to try and protect certain positions. And tomorrow, the risk with that is that it will set a precedent where the next government, whoever is in power, the opposition would say, no, sorry, you are not happy with the way you are running your revenue collection, you are not happy with the way you are running your security, we need a referendum. So it's the issues, really, to me, that matter more than the timing.
Okay, all right.
The timing. Although, of course, some would argue that even with CIC still in place, and looking at all the issues of implementation and so many things still pending, really, in terms of getting the Constitution fully operational, it might be
so for you, we should get it operational first, and it should be more about the issues and less about the individuals.
Not at all.
I mean, there's the allegation that this is all about somebody trying to get his way into power.
No, far from it, because that is an argument that is not based on law. It's somebody is engaging in flights of fancy. Let me tell you, in the schedule that this committee of experts came up with, the articles on the amendment of the Constitution were not put. Were no transitional clauses. On the amendment. What does that mean? It means that immediately that constitution came into force, after it was gazetted, we as a country and the people of Kenya have a right to demand for the issues that are listed under Article 255 to be checked. In fact, the people of Kenya and the committee of experts, and I want to thank them for doing a good job, have listed the issues that you ideally ought to go to a referendum. The issues that are outside that framework can also be drafted and will go to Parliament and will go to the people for discussion. The Constitution has such mechanisms that you cannot engage in flights of fancy about its amendment.
All right, not engaging in flights of fancy, but let's talk about those issues very quickly, because he says it's about individuals and their interests. What are your issues with the Constitution?
There are two core issues. First of all, in Article 255, and Senator Kero, who is my chairman in finance, will agree. First, on devolution, Chapter 11. That is something that we need to look at. We need to ask ourselves the question, what exactly did we get into devolution for? Because at the moment, governors are busy paying salaries and we do not have developments because of resources not being able to reach the public the way they were envisioned. So that is an issue. Two, the issue about Parliament, which is part of the issues that ought to be discussed in terms of a referendum or amendment, the Senate. We at the Senate are saying we need to be protected and insulated more than we are so that we can protect this Constitution. And I have a case in point. Parliament recently, and it was last week, amended Article 204, which gives the mandate of Equalization Fund to be run by counties. Nobody's talking about it. Yet they are amending the Constitution without consulting the public. That is an issue that ideally ought to be dealt with at the Senate level. So we are simply asking, and most senators will not agree now, but quietly in their hearts they will tell you that our work is being affected by this issue about who is doing what. But we want to be able to stand in the gap between what you call supremacy of houses and the executive, so that we can protect the counties in terms of our mandate and Article 96.
Hold that thought there, because there's a tweet that's coming in here. Maybe is pointing to what you were talking about, from Idris Abdi Abdullahi, who says, no, there's only a power struggle between politicians and the institutions they serve in. Kenyans are watching 2017 vote. And Bobby, this brings me to that. All of this that we see going on, he's saying, you know, why not now? He's saying it's all about the issues. Yes. Will there ever be a right time to have a referendum? Yesterday we spoke to Paul Mwangi. He said, well, the converse argument is that, you know, it's too close to the last one. But then everybody else is saying, well, they're looking forward to 2017. But we'll always be in between election periods. Is there ever a right time to do a referendum?
And neither is there a wrong time. You know. And I think that's why even as Kenyans, I believe in their wisdom, crafted the Constitution, did not give timelines to that. And they left it to what is happening right now for us to be able to sit down and determine such issues. First, as Mheshimiwa said, look at the issue that is being proposed. Any Kenyan has a right to stand up and propose through different initiatives, either by invoking their representatives in parliament or through a popular initiative, an amendment to the constitution. But even beyond that, we have referenda envisioned or envisaged for other issues through the Elections Act.
Okay. Yes.
So that is a right that we've given birth to through the new constitution, and that those issues could be considered at any time. So the issues we'll need to look at are, what is the issue, and is the issue of such gravity and importance that it must be considered at that particular time.
As a referendum.
And
Bobby,
secondly,
do you feel that we have reached that threshold? Do you feel that this is being driven by the people?
In fact, one thing I think is that we are already talking about the referendum a bit too soon, because there are still hurdles to be crossed over before we get to the point of the reality of a referendum, as has been proposed by CORD and also by the governors. So I think as we move along, that's when we'll be able to tell the reality of the time we're going to have the referendum if we get to that point. And my advice would be, if we get to that point when it is close to the general election, let's do it the way other jurisdictions do it, that you also consider referendum issues during a general election, so that you save on time, you save on logistics, and other issues also come into play, so that the politicization of the entire process is tied to the general election. So we can do it that way.
Okay. Senator, what do you think about the issues that have been raised? If you've had an opportunity to take a look at that petition that is going around, some say it is too general, talking about strengthening the constitutional commissions that we have, the electoral body. Do you feel, adequate? Of course, we know about the court case that will be determined later this week or heard this week. What do you think about the issues that have been raised? Do they warrant a referendum?
One thing that we need to be conscious of is the fact that it took nearly 20 years to get this constitution. We had 2 referendums. So many issues have been so contentious that it took a lot of time, and we eventually had a compromise on many issues. Many of the issues that you see, including the issue that Senator has just mentioned about the powers of the Senate, vis-a-vis that of the National Assembly. These are all things that required a lot of compromises because of the contentious nature of some of the issues. So given that, I still think that some of the issues that they're raising, at the end of the day, because of the contentious nature, really, that to get an agreement on them has been so difficult that it's not going to be easy to get them through. And I say they are not, some issues are acceptable to me. Personally, if you tell me, for example, if the intention is to address some of the concerns like the institutions, like the Senate or the powers of the National Assembly, because Senates are there to check on the powers of the National Assembly, generally most jurisdictions. But if you tell me that, for example, you want to increase revenue from 15% minimum to 45%, I find it completely a very vexing issue, because it's not practical. Absolutely.
Why not?
Because even if you base it on today's revenue, the one projected for this financial year, we're projecting to collect 1 trillion shillings. If you take 45%, that's 450 billion. What remains is 550. If you just look at the redemption of debts alone, in any one year, today as we speak, payment of debts and pensions is 400 billion shillings. If you look at the Ministry of Education alone, it's 300 billion. It's impossible.
So
there's no way, unless you are saying we will have 47 different governments and we forget about the national government. And then you can talk of sharing out in that formula.
Okay.
So I think some of the things are really being put in there simply to score a point, to make a
scoring political points.
Yes, I don't think it's practical.
As he said, there was a compromise. I want to first of all deal with the question of the referendum. In fact, if you look at the constitutional insulation on amendment, a referendum is actually a default where both houses have failed to pass the law. It must be looked at from that perspective. That the first obligation will be the both houses of parliament. it will go to referendum if they fail to pass the bill. But on the question of the figures, how did the experts and my chairman is responsible for some of these clauses? How did you arrive at a minimum of 15? Now, how do you go to 45? How do you go to 50? We have said, and so many, Senator Kero knows.
It's based on the functions.
Yeah. Now,
the functions.
at some point, everybody says, like national government says, we have devolved all the functions to counties. And Article 187 says, don't devolve a function if you don't follow it with a resource. The function of health.
Fund follows function.
Yes. For example, the national government will tell you they have devolved 93%. But the real fact is that there are no funds in health because the money is still being held at national government. So the question of funding is critical. If we must get to a point, in fact, forget about the money, we must increase the functions. We have said, for example, why should the national government, somebody seated in Jogo House, determine why a school somewhere in Makueni called Kisayani, why should they be the one to determine whether it should be built or not, why it needs a roof or not? Why should the national
government... That is determined, it should be determined by the county government.
But it is a function of the national government.
So
why
you
should
want all functions devolved?
Yeah,
Are the counties ready for those functions?
No.
Like you talked about with the health.
Sorry.
If you look at the report by COE, the first draft of harmonization that you guys did, one of the things that they mentioned is that everything about transfer of functions will be dependent on the capacity. That this is why a transitional period of 3 years was given. But because when immediately the governors came in, they demanded everything immediately. The government said fine, but the procedure was to give it
over 3 years.
Because of the issue of capacity. The reason why we're having challenges in health today is not lack of money. It's because of capacity. It's capacity, really. I mean, in some of the
it's capacity.
level 5,
but there's no money. Even if you have to give capacity.
So really, the issue is, for every function that is transferred,
you give money.
You transfer money.
Yes, commensurate.
And who determines that? It's the Commission of Revenue Allocation will do a costing based on that. And I think we sit in a committee where they did, for example, this year, and they said the maximum that can go to the county government, based on that, they came up with 279 billion.
279.
So if really you wanted to go as a percentage, you'll go for 27% of the trillion shillings that they expect to collect this financial year. This is the maximum that, so the 45 is really not workable unless you simply say we've shut down Nairobi.
I'd like to give you a moment because the two of you have spoken, even as you conclude, possibly in less than a minute.
I would say what is happening here is beautiful. and when we promulgated the Constitution on August 27th, 2010, we were not saying as Kenyans this is the perfect deal. We're saying this is a working deal, and we will start the work now of improving and enhancing it as we move along.
So for you, this is healthy?
This is healthy.
Okay, all right. We need to leave it at that. I need to give you just a minute to conclude on this and whether you feel the electorate has been given enough information to make a decision on whether to go for a referendum or not.
The most important point in the minute is that the sovereign of this constitution is the people of Kenya. We exercise that function either as leaders or they will do it themselves. If you ask the person out there in the village whether they have seen the true value of devolution, they will tell you no, simply because we have not done enough to ensure that devolution is working. So I like the dialogue. We are now talking because we will at some point get to on issues.
All right. Talking on issues. Some may not see it as talking. One in less than a minute, please.
No, I personally, I think we have a challenge really as regards the constitutionalism in this country, and I think it's important that leaders appreciate that when you have the opportunity, really you must work on building the culture of constitutionalism in this country. Otherwise, what will happen is every time you're not happy with what happens, you want to say, let us have a different law. I think we must build our institutions and be able to respect the institutions as long as they follow the rule of law.
But amending the constitution is also constitutionalism. Please, come on.
That could be it. We could talk about this until the cows come home. But those are the views that we are receiving today from the panel. What are your views? Keep them coming. Sky T. Kariuki says, as much as the referendum is everyone's right, can it be done in a civilized way when it's absolutely important? Perhaps referring to the rhetoric. Keep your comments coming in as we discuss this celebrating 4 years of the Constitution. That's been Checkpoint. We take a break. We'll be back with the sports news.
The day's events kicked off in the morning with volleyball action at the Dar es Salaam National Stadium. The match between Kwantanze Girls and Indongo Burenzi of Rwanda was the highlight match of the day, as it attracted a huge number of fans, and the players did not disappoint as Kwantanze Girls defended the East African Championship, withstanding Rwanda's opposition by 3 straight sets of 25-18, 25-18 and 27-25.
Tangu tuanze kutoka zonos mpaka mwisho, tumepiga timu zote kutoka Kenya, Afrika Mashariki 3-0. Kwa hivyo ni ujuzi ambao timu yetu iko nao.
This is the best tournament that we have ever had in the last 10 years. Or the 13 years of the Brookside East African competition. The number of participants has been the highest, with over 3,000.
In the boys' equivalent, St. Mary's Chitende trounced Malava Boys 3-2 in 3 straight sets of 31-29, 20-25, 26-26, 17-25 and 12-25. At the University of Dar es Salaam grounds, Maseno School won the rugby title for the first time in history with a 13-3 drubbing over Hana Miss from Uganda, courtesy of tries from Dari Lokeo and Jeremy Odhiambo, who scored 2 penalties and 2 conversions. In the boys' soccer final, St. Mary's Chitende from Uganda beat compatriots Chibuli 4-3 through penalty flicks after the game ended 1-1 at stoppage time. The 13th edition of the East Africa Secondary School Games has finally come to a close, an event that elicited mixed reactions, with some of the big names falling out in the final stages, and they will now have to wait till next year in Kigali, Rwanda. Victor Ugale, KTN, at the Dar es Salaam National Stadium, Tanzania.
The Brookside East Africa Secondary School Championship, brought to you by Brookside. Brookside, nurturing sporting talent.
KCB boosted its chances of defending the national Safaricom 7 circuit by bagging its 3rd win of the season at the Prince Louis Sevens tournament in Nakuru. The Bankers edged out hosts Top Fry Nakuru 26-10 to remain top of the standings with a massive 85 points, while Homeboys are second at 68 points. The final stop will be the Safaricom Christie Sevens in Nairobi next weekend.
Nakuru wanted to impress at their home backyard, and so did they start the tie on a high gear, going ahead courtesy of a Philip Kwame try. Edwin Salamba was at it with the Bankers' response through his own try and a well-taken conversion kick. Peter Kilonzi added KCB's advantage, going over for a 12-5 lead for the Bankers at halftime. Charles Odhiambo reduced the margin for Nakuru with his unconverted try before the Bankers tightened the grip on the game, bossing the breakdown, scoring 2 converted tries through Jacob Oji and Oliver Mangeni for a 26-10 lead.
It's been tough. Yeah, teams have trained and everyone is looking forward to winning a trophy. Yeah, it has not been easy.
Given that we faltered a bit in Mombasa, the boys picked it up. We knew what we had to do. Like I said again, mental strength is what carries a good team like this.
KCB have cemented their Safaricom series lead with 85 points. Homeboys are placed second with 68 points. With 1 leg to go, KCB have already registered their name as the champions this year, but they want to spice it and make it even better and clinch the Christie Sevens next week. Moses Wahisi, KTN Sports.